authorities. And then the Israeli authorities said, we don't have any control here. You should go to Father Benoit. And they'd go you round and round in circles. So what happened, this Israeli official said to me, you'll never see the scrolls in your lifetime. This was in 1986. And he meant it. And I said to my colleague Davis as we walked out of that interview, the hell you say, we'll see the scrolls, whatever. And in 5 years, not 5 years after that, we had total access. And this book here, the one you have on the table in front of you, was really the breaking of that monopoly. The facsimile edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you open it up, David, you can show your viewer audience that in there are all the plates that were being withheld. 1,800 plates, some of them, of course, in little fragments and tatters, but 1,800 plates that were withheld that we finally got access to not 5 years. That was published in 1991. So literally 5 years after they told us we'd never see the scrolls in our lifetime, we had them all published for public access. And that was because of the anger we felt and the frustration we felt that this wasn't going to be allowed to stand. And I frankly have to say, I never had a chance before a television audience to say it before, we didn't publish that book for our own benefit because we didn't derive any benefit from that book. I mean, we felt that everybody should have an equal opportunity to look at the scrolls. Amateur and professional alike, professional from any institution, amateur from any institution, from your church, from any other church, it didn't matter. And we felt the only way to level the playing field, I'll explain this to you in a moment, the only way to level the playing field was to publish all the pictures for everybody to use. Let's have a level playing field, and then we can get proper interpretation of the scrolls. Let me just explain that. What is meant by proper interpretation of the scrolls? The establishment team, this is the problem, not so much censorship or church doctrine or whatever. The establishment team were all conservative, church-oriented people of a church mindset, of an Orthodox Christian mindset. They felt the scrolls were alien to them. So in their theories, they distanced the scroll from the origins, the scrolls from the origins of Christianity as far as possible. Therefore, when the copper scroll came in, and a very famous article in the 1950s by Edmund Wilson came in the New Yorker, who was a communist fellow traveler, on the relation of the Dead Sea Scrolls to early Christianity, and John Allegro's theories also, this caused great consternation. And it was at this point that the veil of secrecy came down. When the Israelis conquered the scrolls, or East Jerusalem in the late 60s, they inadvertently furthered the monopoly because they reaffirmed the previous monopoly in control of the scrolls because they didn't understand all these complexities. But the final problem was that the people controlling the scrolls were putting their interpretations on these scrolls too. I put this in succinctly in that book you have there, Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered. I said that control of the unpublished manuscripts meant control of the field, and that's what the problem was.
Professor Eisenman, my understanding of the situation was that this book, a facsimile edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls, was a publication of scrolls never before seen by the public. These scrolls were the custody of that team, and somehow you got possession of photographic copies of all of these scrolls. This whole book, for the viewers...
That's 2 volumes. It's not just one. There's 1,800 plates.
Yeah, this is volume 1.
And there's another volume.
As I flick through the
Published
pages,
by the Biblical Archaeology Society in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
There's a case already still going on in the Israeli Supreme Court about that publication.
Well, my understanding was that you somehow were sent copies of photographs of unpublished Dead Sea Scrolls, never before released by the public. And
released
then,
to the public, yeah.
And then, if you don't mind my saying this is my own opinion, so it's not you bragging, you courageously published this edition of these unpublished Dead Sea Scrolls so that other scholars and the public could actually see for the first time Dead Sea Scrolls that had been withheld by that team for 40, 50 years. Well, I think that was a very brave thing for you to do, but what I want to know is...
It was braver for the people who gave it to us, but,
well, that's what I want to know.
But they're not identified.
How the heck did you get into your possession photographs of unpublished Dead Sea Scrolls.
Well, I'm the only one who knows the answer to that, and I've never revealed the answer to that to anyone except the people who cooperated with me on that. Not even the editor of the Biblical Archaeological Review, Herschel Shanks, the final publisher of that book. That's an interesting story, too, the publication of that, because he wasn't the first publisher. This was published, if you know the chronology, in November of 1991. So that was when, and I said the only way to break the monopoly, and I mean not just research, but interpretation of the scrolls, was to publish everything. You have to cut through the Gordian knot. This book was scheduled for publication in April of that year by a different European publisher, a very famous European publisher, who 10 days before publication date pulled out because of pressure that was brought to bear. Whether it was because of the scrolls, they deny it was because of the scrolls, or some other reason, whatever the reason, they pulled out, and I don't know what their reasons were, but they pulled out 10 days before publication date. We had all the scrolls a year before. We had everything ready to go. And they pulled out for various reasons that have never been revealed, and I don't satisfactorily know myself whether it was pressure or something else, but they pulled out, leaving us high and dry without a publisher. It was then that the Huntington Library stepped in. The Huntington Library caught wind of this, and it was not until June, July, and August that the Huntington Library got involved in their decision to open up its archives. So strictly speaking, the Huntington Library actually opened up its archives. I was the consultant to the Huntington Library in San Marino on its decision to go public with these scrolls. They talked to me very seriously about the repercussions, and I explained to them that there wouldn't be any repercussions except from the Israeli government. And they explained why. Well, because I said the Israeli scholars would feel that they were just getting into it now, and they would want control of the scrolls of themselves, and they would feel aggrieved that you're opening this up to the general public again. You would be back to square one, and which is exactly what happened. But I have to say, the Huntington Library, I got a call from the Huntington Library in September of 1991 saying it's go, and they went. But I have to say that the Huntington Library never really showed the scrolls to anyone, even though they said they were opening their archives until the next year. Nobody ever got up to the Huntington Library until 1992. We published this book in 1991, so everyone could see everything. So the Huntington Library, though they said that they opened their archives, it was only, to a certain extent, a shadow play. I didn't even go and look at the Huntington Library, although I was up there with them and looked at the material, but no one did research. No one was allowed to look at anything until 1992. Now, so actually this book was the first book that was shown.
Am I correct that when you released...
This was the second publication, because this publisher took it up after the first publication in April had been basically vetoed by somebody.
Am I correct that when you